When creating advanced campaigns in Marketo, we need to create a series of different automated workflows which work together. Part of that is sequencing smart campaigns. What I mean by that is having campaigns which trigger other campaigns so as to create a workflow that progresses leads through that particular program. Let's do a very simple example. For the My First event that we created previously in marketing activities, let's rename the send invite to 01 send invite. This gives us a bit of an idea of the order. Now we're going to create a second smart campaign called 02, and we're going to call that send reminder. So now the sequence we want these to work in is to send the invite and then send a reminder after a few days. The numbers on the campaigns are simply a convention to make it easier to read. Now for send reminder, we want this to activate after a person's been invited. So the way to do that is to use a trigger, and the trigger we're interested in is the program status is changed. So what we're going to do now is add a constraint to that as well to say that the new status is invited. So this particular workflow will run when a lead becomes invited, so after this send invite occurs. So all we want to do now for this send reminder is simply send the reminder email. We're not interested in which email, so just grab any. And then what we'll need to do is to activate it and potentially change the qualification rule so that it runs every time, and then we'll click activate. So this is a very simple example of how to sequence campaigns. The first one will run manually, so when we schedule it, it's a batch campaign, but the second campaign we created, send reminder, is a trigger campaign that runs as a lead progresses to the invited stage. So as you can imagine, you can have a lot of different campaigns triggering on program statuses being changed. A change of program status is one way to sequence smart campaigns in Marketo. The other way is to use lists. Lists are useful if you want to get a bit more fine-grained than simply a status such as invited. Perhaps you have different streams, stream A and a stream B at a particular event, and you wish to keep track of that and actually do different automated workflows based on stream A or stream B. Now, a lead could be invited, but we need to know more than whether they're just invited. We need to know which stream they belong to. So let's do that, for example. Firstly, we need to create the lists, which will help us keep track of who is where. So we'll go create a new local asset, create a static list, and we're going to call that stream A list. Click create. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing, except we're going to call the next one stream B list. Now for the send invite, we're going to go to flow. We're going to keep the change program status the same, but we're going to randomly assign people to the different stream A and stream B lists. So the way to do that is we're going to use add to list. We're going to add a choice, and we're going to create a random sampling, which is a very useful one. Now random sample is simply give it a number such as 50, and if the random number is below 50, then it'll do the first step, which is to add them to stream A. If not, they'll end up in stream B, and you can change that to anything. So for example, if I change this to 20, it would mean 20% of the people would end up in A and the rest would land in B. Now let's use the membership of this list, A or B, to drive or trigger another campaign. So we're going to create a new smart campaign, and we're going to call it send stream A info. So this would be perhaps some information on stream A, and then we're going to create the same thing, but we're going to call it send stream B info. So we want these two to trigger when someone is not just invited, but is a member of a list. So in fact, we're going to not use program statuses at all. We're simply going to use a trigger called added to list. So this trigger added to list can then refer to stream A list or B list. So in this particular case, it'd be the A list. And then for that flow, we would send an email. We don't care which email. Let's just pick one of them. And then we would schedule and activate that. So now what we have is we have a campaign that's triggered when someone becomes a member of a stream A list. So there's still an invited program status. That hasn't changed, but now we're using the membership of a list to actually drive workflow. And we'll do the same thing for stream B. Go to the smart list. We'll create a trigger called added to list, and this you'll notice is also removed from list. And then we'll select the stream B list. And then for the flow, we'll just send an email. And that would normally be some information on stream B, but in this case, we don't care. We'll just select the internal test send email, and then we'll click activate. So there you have it. The second way you can sequence smart campaigns is to use membership of a list, and you can add and remove people from this list, which will then trigger these particular workflows. This is really useful when you need to get more granular than a simply top level program status like invited.